story like the back of my hand, 'cause I've heard it all before.
Taxes are the only certainty. Well, 20% of people of society. And I have made it on my own in this world. Well, nothing to get a turn around a 2-year-old. I'm gonna start the old nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna start the old nation with myself of reservation. I'm gonna start the old nation with myself of reservation. Well, let me talk a bit about the weather. You must admit it's not very clever. Don't get me wrong, it's not an anti-British song. Well, there is nowhere I would rather be wrong. I'm gonna start my own nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna start my own nation with myself a reservation. I'm gonna start my own nation with myself a reservation. There are just a few things that I would like to say about the UK and how I think it has gone astray. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up, but you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna start the old nation with myself a reservation. I'm gonna start the old nation with myself a reservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
Hello, everybody. I apologise. I'm back. I'm so sorry. I've moved house. While we were listening to the music, I was googling what you call an inhabitant of Whitby, and I can't find any special name. So I am now an inhabitant of Whitby. I am not an Acliffarian anymore. I'm a Whitbyarian. And sort of, I'm not even a County Durhamarian anymore. I'm a North Yorkshire-arian. So life has moved on for me, and I don't know whether I'm welcome here in this sort of bevy of wonderful County Durham people. I'll just have to hope that they accept me as an outsider.
And Devonian.
I do.
We've got a Devonian, by the way. Is that right? Someone from
Devon.
Devon. Devonian.
I thought that. Oh, Jane, yes, of course, I've forgotten. Yeah, it's right. You're from Devon.
No, I'm more like a Dovorian. I'm near Dover.
A Dovarian.
That's what I meant. I'm just tired.
It's just one vowel that's different. It's very similar.
So is there a special, I'm sorry, listeners, we're just chuntering amongst ourselves. Please forgive us for a moment. But Jane, is there a special word for an inhabitant of Dover?
I think I've heard Dovorian before.
No?
I wouldn't. Yeah, I've never referred to myself as such before, so I'm not sure about that.
It's just a citizen of the world. Anyway, hello everybody. It's so good to see you. And I'm back. First of all, I'm going to say hi to Jane, who so wonderfully, in fact, rather wonderfully, I'm afraid, Jane, rather you were just a bit too good at it for my liking. Stepped in as chair last week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. It's so good to have you back.
No. The crowds out there are sort of rioting to bring back Jane. Bring back Jane, they're shouting. Paul, hello.
Greetings.
Sam, hello.
Hello.
Hello. And Stuart, last but not least, God bless, the dream team is assembled. And we are ready to go with views, people, which are not your normal question time establishment views. And the people in front of you will give you what they think. They won't tell you what they think they ought to be telling you. So it's a really refreshing view on the news. And my golly, we've got some news for you today. So let's cut to the quick.
Oh, it didn't work. Did it? John, you're going to have to sing it.
The moment of the week. Okay, the moment of the... It wasn't all that bad. Mind you, I did used to keep my classes quiet when I was a teacher by threatening to sing to them. Sam, what was your moment of the week?
Well, it's great news because human beings might have been out of their lockdown for some time, but it's finally going to be time to let the chickens out of chicken lockdown. Big news for chickens.
How bad has this wave been, Sam? It's passed me by as this.
I mean, actually, it's wreaked havoc on the commercial poultry egg farming in the UK. Currently, there are no eggs being produced in the UK that can be described as free range because chickens have been kept undercover for so long because of bird flu. Bird flu just flat out kills chickens, but it's transmitted by wild birds and who can carry it quite happily. So when they do their poop and it lands on a chicken, it's pretty bad news. So I mean, this is a pro veganism, anti-animal exploitation thing, really, because the reason we're in this terrible situation where we keep having these really vicious outbreaks of avian flu is because of how badly managed our commercial flocks are. You know, we're talking about flocks of 8, 10, 12, 15,000 birds, and if you're going to have that many together, then any kind of illness is just catastrophic. So I've got 8, so I'm not part of the problem, and I can have eggs without feeling bad about it.
I mean, this is I'm just going to make a comment and run on with, but basically we are messing up nature. We're messing with nature at every level, and it's coming back to bite us on the bottom. Jane, your moment of the week.
So I'm sorry if someone else was going to say this because they might have been, but so Priti Patel wanted to turn around the ships in the channel, the little boats, and send them back to France. And the CPS Union and Care for Calais and a couple of other charities took out a legal challenge against her. So the government legal department issued a letter the other day saying that they're withdrawing that policy mysteriously a few days before the court hearing, and they won't be doing that anymore, and that they have no permission to do that. So they won't be turning those little ships around and trying to send them back to France.
That woman's a disaster, isn't she? I mean, everything
she's a very kind person.
It's to shit, really, doesn't it? It's just horrific. Yes, and glad we're doing that. We shouldn't be sending them to Rwanda, you know. There's a disaster as well. God bless you, Jane, for that moment of the week. Paul, what was your moment of the week?
I've just had my moment of the week, so I've kind of been in a bit of a rush to get sorted today because I've come back from work and then I rode my bike down to a new cycle circuit that my club have been putting together. It's actually nothing to do with me, but I'm now on the committee. So I've just been riding around this cycleway that's going to be a really brilliant resource for the community, something really nice for the kids of the area, something nice for my family, something nice for my cycling club. So it's kind of nice to see national investment in the form of British cycling coming back. Like, you know, all that money we spent on athletes, getting them to Olympic finals and stuff like that. This is what it's really about. It's about the grassroots side of it, and it's really nice to see something that can be used by communities. And it was absolutely brilliant. And I've I don't know if you know what a Strava King of the Mountains is, but I've managed to set one by virtue of the fact I've had no competition, which is absolutely brilliant. So I'm the fastest person in one of the ways around this circuit. And I'll never get another one of them again. So that's my moment of the week.
Thank you. Really important. The rules have changed for cycling on the road with the results that I don't know, the highway rules. I am much nearer to killing a cyclist nowadays. It's much more dangerous, I think, for cyclists on the roads. We need to be careful about cyclists. Flying poo is a problem. We all agree with that. Leanne Powell's moment of the week. Just surviving. I know how you feel. Remember, everybody, that we like you to put your moments of the week as well as sharing our moments of the week. If I've missed any important ones, I've got the team looking out for them as well, but I haven't seen any. Have you got a moment of the week you can share with us just briefly before we move on? I'm going to take Stuart's. What's your moment of the week, Stuart?
Well, my one's a rough one. Jacob Rees-Mogg had tweeted and subsequently removed a tweet where he said that if anybody who was worried about paying for their energy costs, the gas, the electricity, that they should join the armed forces, is all that's provided for you. And that there was so much opportunity for people and going without shouldn't be an option. Which kind of said everything that you needed to know about this government and the direction that they think travel should be going. That if you're disabled, ill, unwell, a carer, a parent, a woman, in many cases, they don't care about you, that they don't think that you should have the right to security, for energy, for food, for housing, as part of your job. You know, the idea that somebody who was concerned, about energy might have been a nurse, that they should join the army because that's the opportunity for them. Those people were saving lives, and they don't feel like those people deserve the right to security. It's been something that's sat in my mind for days, just how open they are about how, and Paul described it best, that they just see us as a meat shield, and we should take our chances, to best survive. It's shocking. It's disgusting. It's disgraceful.
They do, Stuart, do not see their job as caring for people, or the poor and the vulnerable. They see caring for people as being people's problem. It's your, look after yourself. It's your problem to look after yourself. Find a way to look after yourself, because it's not my problem. And you have to ask yourself, if that's the case, why the hell are we electing them? We're electing people who, whenever we have a problem, just say, not my problem. Not my problem, your problem, sort it out. You could do that, eat porridge. Okay, I haven't got any moments of the week that I'm seeing on the feed. Anybody seen anything?
Neil managed to get a free drink in the Hilton.
Yes, that's true. I don't know whether that's something to boast about as a socialist. What are you doing in the Hilton, Neil?
No.
bit
Good
past
socialists stay at the Hilton.
Oh, no.
Sometimes.
I've been home doing my DIY here. He's swanning around with all the posh people in the Hilton.
Ruth saw a stoat for the first time.
Oh, that's
Okay.
great.
That's good.
I was out for a walk and a little vole ran across the path, sort of. So nature is there, but for God's sake, take care of it. Right, let's move on.
Now it's time for the big story.
And the big story, whether you like it or not, people, it was the French election, wasn't it? This sort of came out of nowhere. It was just sort of one of those things happening in the background, and I said, "Oh, blew up in your face. There's a big kind of crisis." And ooh, dearie me. I have to say this, that when I heard that Macron had won, I involuntarily said, "Thank God for that." Paul, what word would describe your reaction to news of the Macron victory?
It's really hard to sum up what I felt in a word. Worried is probably the correct phrase. Not worried that Le Pen was defeated. That's fine. But the problem is Le Pen had a much strengthened vote compared to previous years. I believe that's because of this vacuous centrism. If you have a look at the debate in France, it's been pretty bleak coming from some of Macron's people. One of the I think it's the equivalent of their Home Secretary, said something during a debate that shocked Le Pen because it was so racist against Muslims. Shocked the person who was from the Front National. Macron has not been anti-racist, I don't believe. So the worry for me is that the debate in France became about a centrism that isn't centrism, a centrism that the Overton window has moved really far over to the right, and it was a debate and saying, right, okay, what's going to happen? Shall we have the person who is openly racist, or shall we ask the person who's trying to pander to the openly racist vote, whilst also promoting neoliberal policies, not doing anything about the cost of living crisis because they haven't one as well in France, although not as extreme as us because they've got nationalised energy and what have you. Are we going to be really, really pleased about the idea that there will be more neoliberalism, no answers to the poverty that ordinary people are finding themselves in, no socialist ideas, and that the Overton window in France has moved further to the right, despite the fact that over a quarter of the votes went to left-wing people, and we don't know what Macron's vote was made up of. Something that really worried me as well as Mélenchon's vote, like a lot of them didn't vote at all. So the people who voted for Jean-Luc Mélenchon didn't vote for Macron, because after what I described, like, sort of, why would you? So there's a lot of relief, I believe, from certain quarters in France that the openly racist person is not in charge, but I don't think there's much joy that Macron is in. And what you'll find is a lot of working class people voted for the far right candidate, for Marine Le Pen, mainly because she was actually talking about the cost of living crisis and stuff. And this is something that we need to really, really worry about. Centrism doesn't have the answers to these things, because centrism chases some sort of elusive group of voters, and they aren't actually being centrist at all. They're not saying, oh, we'll take some left-wing policies and we'll take some right-wing policies and we'll marry them up. What they're saying is, we will do what we've always done. We will keep things exactly the same. We will continue on the path that we're on. And any questions that we can't answer will remain unanswered. And that's the situation that we find ourselves in a lot of the world, in a lot of the West. And it's problematic. So I'm not jumping for joy that Macron got over the line with a reduced majority. I think it's absolutely frightening, the number of votes that Le Pen got. And for me, I don't know, like, there are no answers. I wish the left had got their act together, because it would have been a much different contest had it been a left wing against Macron, because Macron got the most votes in the opening round. That would have been a fun debate, and I think that would have been something we could have changed things. Those ideas are going to be out there, and Macron would then be saying, well, actually, I'm really worried about the left-wing vote. But the left-wing vote's now got nowhere to go, which means they don't take part in the debate, which means the Overton window will consistently move to the right, as it has done for the last 40 years.
I agree. Just before I move on, one of the people described the choice. It's Mia here, and yes, one woman in France said the choice between Macron and Le Pen was like a choice between cholera and the plague. Does that strike a chord with you, Paul?
I don't know. I don't know whether I'd describe Macron as a disease, but he's kind of more like the absence of anything, isn't he? He's like, I don't know. There's really something about him that, like, you know, he was in the Socialist Party and he was a minister there, but actually he's a big business guy, and, you know, he's got a lot of money behind him, and he's this, you know, when he started dressing like Zelensky, that sums him up really. He's someone who follows trends. He's someone who wants to be a politician because he likes the idea of being president, you know, and it's not good for society. So I don't know whether you'd consider that to be a really a disease thing. But I think the whole system is. I don't like going after individuals either, but then our system promotes individuals, so I like going after the system rather than individual people. I think the system's very sick, and I think we need to change that. And it's clearly not just in the UK that the system needs to change.
Sam, one person described the vote as quasi-insurrectional. The number of people voting far right was quasi-insurrectional. I mean, one, how worried are you about it? But two, can you start by telling us why did the right do so well?
I think we have to pay attention to the people who aren't talking as much as the people who are talking. And when people feel like their vote doesn't make a difference, they find other ways to express their opinions that are potentially more damaging and disruptive and dangerous. I think, you know, what Paul said and what we've seen in our own politics, if we look at the far right forces that have acted on our politics, for example, Mr. Farage, you know, the reason he got as much traction he got, despite never winning an election in as an MP, you know, he got into the European Parliament. But what people would tell you on the doorstep is that he's like me. He says the things that matter to me. He's talking about the things that you people in power don't want to talk about. So when you pit any political force up as anti-establishment, and there's a lot of criticism of the establishment, a lot of anti-establishment feeling, then they're going to get a lot of capital off that. And that is a really good way to catapult people with really terrible views into relative power. So it's scary and it's worrying. But like I said, more worrying than the people who maybe held their nose and voted for Le Pen, and not Le Pen, the other one, Macron. The people who didn't vote at all. And what are they going to do next? And where are they going to take their distrust of the
Can I
system
interrupt you,
next?
Sam? Large numbers of young people didn't vote at all.
Hmm.
Very few young people voted for Le Pen. Some voted for Macron, but large numbers, 41% of young people didn't vote at all. This is an element of disillusionment there, isn't it?
Yeah, and potentially so much more damaging.
I mean, one of the issues which comes out is this element of the forgotten France. The territories sort of voted massively for Le Pen. Rural areas voted massively for Le Pen, particularly in the extremes, in the far north and in the far south. They voted for Le Pen, and old people particularly voted for Le Pen. I mean, do you spot any parallels here between France and what we've got in Great Britain?
Yes. Oh, my brain.
Elaborate. Oh, you've frozen, Sam. That's one way to escape the question, isn't it? Jane, I'll switch to you. I'll come back to you, Sam, if you can. Oh, are you back, Sam? Have you been talking? You froze for a while.
I'm back. No. I only said go and talk to somebody else because my internet's
That's right. Jane, thank you, Sam. God bless you. Are there? I mean, do you spot any parallels, Jane, between Britain and France here?
I think life is tough for a lot of people, and I feel like the people in charge, the people running government, seem completely out of touch with that. I got the impression that that's the situation in France as well. I was listening to the Owen Jones show that he did about this the other day, and he spoke to one. He was saying, you know, one person he spoke to said it's terrible. People will die if Le Pen gets in because she's going to withhold. She's going to restrict medical treatment for immigrants, and so people will die, and they will, and that's really horrific. And then at another point they mentioned that the life expectancy, and I looked it up, the 5% poorest men in France live 13 years lower than the 5% richest, and for women it's 8 years. People are dying because of the neoliberal economic policies of Macron, but it's more by stealth. So I see why people get to the end of their tether and they just want a protest vote. They want they want someone to listen to them. They want someone to know it's okay. They get sick of seeing people in shiny suits telling them everything's okay. So let's not rock the boat. And I think that's the same here as it is in France.
I think you're spot on with that. And so what happens is we were talking with Stuart, weren't we, in the moment of the week about the fact that we have a government here that says, look after yourself, it's not our problem. And that's the centrist view to so many socialist problems, social problems. Just, we're not going to do anything, get on with it, suffer. And the centrist neoliberal parties are seen as basically screwing the ordinary people for every penny they can get to give it to their rich friends. But here's the question, Jane. Why is it that in both France and Britain, people see this and the right promises them we'll do something about it? But why don't people turn to the left? Why are people turning to the right, who say they have the answers to these problems, rather than to the left? Because it was the same in France as in Britain.
Yeah, I think people can be motivated by hope and they can be motivated by negativity and hatred. And I think what we saw with Labour in 2017, there was a real movement of hope. It was, it was the largest party in membership in the whole of Europe. It had over 500,000 members. There was a huge amount of hope and positivity, really good policies going on. There was something to get behind. And I think I don't think it's the same now. I think negativity, hatred's a very strong emotion too. We're worn out and demoralised after the pandemic, I think, and the 12 years of austerity now in this country. I mean, in France, they've had the Gilets jaunes. How long were they out protesting for? I think people just get tired, don't they? and it's easy to lose hope. But you know, the negative side's always there, looking to pick people up.
Thanks, Stuart. At the moment, Melanchthon is, if that's how you pronounce the name, please forgive me if it isn't, is hoping to become Prime Minister. He sees, sort of during the election, there was, as time went on, Macron had to start appealing more to the left. And is this an opportunity for the left now? Do you see a chance for the left to become more prominent in France?
You would hope that given the opportunity, people would be able to use that platform. We've seen left-wing people in Britain being given platforms and then being taken away. It's kind of like walking the plank in many ways, isn't it? You're being set up to fail while trying to appeal to that person's core voter base. So I think there's some danger in that. And certainly we are looking at this as how the electorate turned out and voted on it. But certainly these people, as political groupings had organised and had learned lessons from elsewhere. So as you've touched on before, like lots of this is mirrored elsewhere. It's likely that we'll see a mirrored position with regards to the Prime Minister.
I'm just looking here at the some of the comments, which are sort of absolutely spot on. La France insoumise, Mark. Can you explain what that phrase means? The French phrase means. Some really good comments being made there.
That's the name of Mélenchon's party, John.
Is it? What does it stand for? What does it mean?
Oh, I'm not sure. I just read it as name of his party earlier. Sorry.
What does the word insoumise mean? Somebody must know out there. Thank you so much for your comments, everybody. One question back to Paul before we go, and you've got a minute, Paul, sort of, and then we're out of time. One of the key things between Le Pen and Macron was over Europe, and Macron is interpreting his election as being ultimately a vote in support of his European agenda. I mean, what do you see happening in Macron's France? How do you see that country going now Macron has survived?
I think it depends which way the wind blows, to be honest. I think if he feels that he needs to encourage certain people to vote for him, if he sees Le Pen as a threat, then he will engage with that kind of idea. He will continue to be extremely harsh on Muslim people. He'll continue to be very strict on whether people can wear a bikini at the beach and things like that, for example. And the rhetoric will not change. I don't see any deviation at all from the policies that are leading us into a very problematic future worldwide. So again, he's a vote for more of the same, and if you don't like the same, then I can see why other people voted against him. The problem is the vote against him would have been to vote for something very, very worrying and very frightening for us all. So yeah, it's a pretty bleak general picture, and I'm sorry I can't cheer it up too much.
No, I can't. I mean, he sort of his vision is militaristic, increasing the armed forces, supporting the Ukraine more aggressively. It's a definitely anti-Russian, pro-European vision, and it doesn't actually go very well, I don't think. Here we go. The star of the show has arrived. With that, people, oh, giving his dinner back. Can we move on to the other stories, Paul?
The story like the back of my hand, 'cause I've heard it all before.
Yes, Sam's responding to the comment that I know Timothy Baton. Please forgive me if that's a mispronunciation of his surname. Who responded to my suggestion that the answer to centrism was the left, and a real comment of anger about the possibility that it might be the left. Samuel, want to pick that up perhaps in the discussion after the show, and if you want to expand on some of those comments, Timothy, we would be very interested. My knowledge is high. Please expand on that. What does that mean? And my anger inextinguishable. Please expand on that. And inexplicable to those who can't listen. I continually get accused of not listening, but very often it's because I simply don't understand what people are saying. It's not not listening. It's just not seeing any point. So please be more specific there. We'd love to explore those ideas. Thank you. Anyway, moving on to the other stories, and we were sort of a few minutes behind Sam. A story in the news this week about the fact that councils aren't using their planning powers to stop bad housing developments. So you stand accused, Sam. Is it fair comment?
Well, we all know that it's always a good bit of fun to hate some councillors, isn't it? Let's hate some councillors and make ourselves feel better about everything that we do in our life, because everybody else is allowed to make mistakes. But councillors and councils have to be omnipotent, omniscient, see the future, see the past. Of course, that's not the way that it is. So the law has been changed to allow councils to object to planning based on a poorly planned developments, right? And the story is that not many councils have rejected housing estates based on bad planning, being badly designed. So, I mean, there are a few things to say about that. Thank you, Mark. He says councillors are trying their best. We absolutely are. What happens if a council planning department gets it wrong? Okay, what happens if, as a person who actually doesn't understand planning, design, what makes something actually good design, I've gone blurry, there we go, what makes a housing development well designed, badly designed, I've got my own subjective idea about that, and if I then encourage my fellow councillors to vote against something because it's badly designed, and it turns out that it's not badly designed, that was just my subjective opinion, I could then cost the council tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds in unnecessary legal costs, right? That's what happens if you reject a planning application for a housing estate on non-legal basis. The housing developer will sue the council and have it overturned. All right, so that's one thing. And the other thing is, why are councils incentivized into allowing housing developments, even if they don't particularly want them? Because they're desperate to raise how much money they can raise through council tax. And this is not because they are money grabbing. It's not because it's all going in my back pocket. It's because it's paying for kids to be looked after. It's paying for elderly people to be looked after. It's paying for our foster carers. It's paying for our bins to be emptied on time, right? Real bread and butter stuff, libraries. We need to maximise as much as we can through council tax, because we've had absolutely horrific cuts to what the central government has offered us over the last 12 years. So unfortunately, if the government is going to play that game, then we're going to have to look very seriously at how we can raise money in other ways.
But Sam, are you not also obligated to make sure that the houses you're allowing to be built are actually fit to live in, and not chicken coops that are going to increase people's problems, poorly insulated, sort of expensive to run chicken coops, are you not being made monkeys of by the developers whose profits are rising all the time? I know what they say, because I was on the planning. They say we can't make a profit unless you let us do this poor housing, and we won't build these houses. But in fact, their profits are going through the roof. And are you just not being made monkeys of by? Are you not kowtowing to big business?
I think what the public don't understand is that planning is a really legal process. You know, you can't just refuse something based on what you feel or what you want, or what you think might be better overall, because you are going to end up, like I said, having appeals lodged with the council that are going to cost them money, and potentially legal disputes that are following on from that. And unfortunately, despite this slight tweaking of the law, the law is very much on the side of housing developers. It's very much on the side of them to be able to do the absolute minimum. And I've got an example of that in my ward. You know, we've got a massive housing development, which was meant to be finished last year, I think. They're still building it. The roads aren't finished. You know, we're constantly having issues associated with it. And it's just blind profit making at people's expense. There is a comment on the thing that says, well, the more houses you have, the more bins you have to empty. That is true. But of course, your council tax doesn't just pay for your bins to be emptied. And one of the problems we have in County Durham is that our housing stock is so predominantly band A and band B properties. So we're actually incentivized to try and build more band D, band E, band F properties, because that's the only way we can actually make council tax work for people and properly redistribute the council tax burden, which we just can't do with so many band A properties.
I think the comment that Jan Gray was making was not the only thing that are empty the bins. What she was saying was that when you allow large numbers of houses, then you increase the costs across the board to the council, and council tax fails to meet those crises. Jacqueline Hemmings, no, it is not true that your council tax goes to the central government, who then redistribute it. And in fact, for the last 12 years, this government has been reducing the amount of central government money that's coming out to councils, but that was always coming from your income tax, which was used to supplement councils' incomes. At the moment, more and more councils are having to survive on the council tax they bring in, and that's the cause of the problems that Sam commenting about. Paul, one of the things that I'm going to go back to Sam. We Jane, this is how not to run the show when you're hosting, because we're running out of time. But I've got to ask Sam this. The chap who was running this survey said that the reason that the developers were running rings around the councils was because of the poor expertise of the planners. True or false?
Well, I mean, again, we can get really philosophical with that question, can't we? Because is it politically expedient for whoever is in control of the council to spend more money on staff? because it's the first thing that gets dragged up in the press, isn't it? You know, Durham County Council has executives that get paid £100,000 plus. You only know that because they're public servants, so their salaries are public. Lots of people get paid much more than that in the private sector. But if you want that expertise to be able to make these decisions, then they come at a cost. So I think there will be like a specific legal definition of what a badly designed housing estate is, and it will require a very, very highly skilled person in the law, in planning, in civil engineering to actually be able to advocate for that for the council. So he's probably right.
I'll pass on your thoughts to the Durham County Council Planning Department. I'm sure they'll be pleased to hear. Jane, it was also suggested this is North versus South things, that the South people are very great and they're prepared to challenge these, and it's good. And the North, they just sort of weakly and pusillanimously kowtow to the. Is there any truth in that, do you think?
I think in the South, unfortunately, I say as a renter, there is a huge amount of money to be made out of property, and there has been for a long time. So the house prices just keep on going up and up, which means that, you know, if you're renting to, the rents go up and up. But either way, it means there's an awful lot of money to be made out of it. So in the South, we have an awful lot of house building, would be my guess, potentially in comparison to communities further up the country where there's not quite such riches to be made out of property, and I would think that would mean that probably councils in the southeast or the south are more likely to have, you know, to divert their resources towards this area because it's something that comes up for them for a lot more. It's my guess, but it seems logical.
I think you're spot on right there. It's neoliberal world. Paul, is it possible to increase the number of houses being built in the north without compromising on design? Is it possible to insist on high design, therefore high cost housing developments in the north of England? Is it a toss-up between houses and good houses?
No, well, it shouldn't be, should it? But I don't think necessarily relying on housing developers to do that and do the right thing when the goal is profit, then probably, yeah, the outcome is always going to be the poorest standard possible, for the most profit possible, and that's the situation that developers find themselves in if they want to make a big profit, you know. And if they've got, I often find it really frustrating with developers where they want to look good and they want to look really positive and they get to do things. So rather than the government expecting them to put good facilities in their area, like put in a play park or something like that within their area, they'd rather sell all the plots of land and then say, hey, local community, you can bid for this little sum of money that will have some kind of amenities for your local area. And everyone's like, oh yeah, this housing company have donated £20,000. They haven't. They've just made like more profit on their area and no one's forced them to put any amenities in. So that's putting pressure on your local schools. It's putting pressure on your local hospitals and your local doctor surgeries and things like that. But then they take the kudos.
But Jan Gray's just said the same thing, that sort of so much of this it's about social infrastructure and sort of the building houses, but they're not putting in doctors and dentists and school places and things like that.
Yeah, that and they should be obliged to do that, but instead we're it's almost like this lottery funding or this kind of like competition. It's like, woohoo, let's see which one of us can get this, and then in the end they're like, hey, we've given you this money to do this nice thing in your area that we were obliged to do before, but now we're not obliged to do it, apart from we can do it in this weird lottery way that makes us look like the good guy, and in reality we're doing a much poorer thing than we used to do. So it's completely set up in favour of making profit and doing the worst for people.
Stuart, what's your solution to this?
Well, this kind of exposes the idea of power. We have the legislation to make them design better. but we don't have the power to do it because we have years of austerity that's taken away our capacity from the councils. It's cut our planning departments right to the bone. That's why in the north we're not tackling this, because we've been cut worst. And then, you know, it comes down to who should be paying for our housing and how we plan it forward. It should be these big companies. You know, Persimmon's made £500 million in 2021, didn't they? Why aren't we taxing them some money that will go directly into that department that would then look at planning? Why aren't they funding that? Why doesn't private, you know, housing sales fund social housing building? There's just a complete inequality in our tax system, and you know how we fund things properly. I mean, the council tax system is a mess. That's not fit for purpose. And it needs to be completely reformed just to tackle things like this, where the legislation's there but the power isn't, because there's such inequality in how we're taxed.
The next topic to talk about, and please forgive me for just moving on, but we are running out of time. By the way, Mark, can you talk? Thank you. Jacqueline Hemming says the same thing. Expand on the idea of fleasehold. I comment, I play on the word leasehold, but what's the scandal? Please tell us more about it, please. Jane, there was another thing today which says that life expectancy for women in the poorest parts of England is less than the overall life expectancy for women in every OECD country in the world apart from Mexico.
Yes.
You must have some thoughts about this, Jane.
It sounds really shocking, especially when you think that we're the 6th richest economy in the world. So how does that possibly stack up? That that we'd be so far down in terms of life expectancy, if everything's distributed fairly, which we all know here that it's not. But when I looked into it, though, it wasn't just the figures on women that were released. Actually, things are even worse for men. They're not looking good for either. But there's a gap of 10 years between the life expectancy of rich and poor men in this country. And the life expectancy for the poorest women is 78 years, and for men 73 years. So it's pretty bleak all around. And I think it's just to do with the awful economic situation we've got in this country now, the ridiculous inequality gap that's being widened by the policies of this government, the austerity policies. I don't know if there's much more to say than that, really.
I mean, it's the position of women. I read the article too. The position of women. This was before the pandemic, and they were sort of they've been described as women have been described as the shock absorbers of poverty, and they've been hit harder by the pandemic. I mean, so first of all, explain to us the meaning of that phrase, shock absorbers of poverty, what it means, how it works in practice. But surely something has to be done about this. And if so, what, Jane?
Well, I think just looking at it, in general terms, women fall into a lot of the categories of people who are really hard hit in this country at the moment. They often tend to be in low wage jobs. Obviously, women, if they take maternity leave or take time at work to have children, that really seriously impacts their careers in a very unfair way. The WASPy women have just been cheated out of huge amounts of money for their pensions. We've got awful housing, expensive food that people can't afford to eat. Sometimes cuts to the NHS have impacted on people. There's lots of ways that women fall into these categories, but I really do feel that this is about the working classes, and poor people in this country are the shock absorbers. The life expectancy for men has gone down ever so slightly more than it's gone down for women. So I think just generally this economy does not work for normal people, is what I'd say.
Especially for the poor. Thank you, Jane. That's a very balanced answer. Sam, quote, this is by Mandu Reid, the leader of the Women's Equality Party. Women are paying a heavy price for a one-size-fits men approach to planning the economy. I thought that was a wonderful, but is it just words? Does it mean anything? Is it true?
Well, it does mean something. I mean, what's the news this week? The news this week is the civil servants need to return to the office. Absolutely no thought about how that impacts women at all. No leeway of, well, maybe, this is let's have a real new normal. We were all looking forward to coming out of COVID and having understood how life could be different, setting out a real new normal where we don't do things, we don't go back to how things were, because how things were wasn't working. But now the powers that be, which basically are newspaper editors who are stirring, hitting political beehives with a stick, say, well, actually, it's time to come back in the office, chaps. Don't care about your childcare responsibilities, don't care about your work-life balance, don't care that the office is 30 miles away from where you live. And those kinds of decisions are the unthinking decisions which have an impact on women. Because even if that worker isn't a woman, that worker is then taken out of the childcare ecosystem, and it's the woman that has to pick up the slack in most families.
True. I agree with you, Sam. Thank you for saying that as bluntly as that. Stuart, Annalise Dodds, everywhere you look, the Tories are letting women down, whether it's their inability to confront the cost of living crisis, their broken promise to deliver a women's health strategy, or their failure to tackle the entrenched structural inequalities in healthcare that are putting Black, Asian and minority ethnic women at risk. True or false? Is it all the Tories' fault?
I don't think it's all the Tories' fault, but they're taking the brunt of responsibility now as a government. I think that, when you step up to be a government, you take all the responsibility, don't you? You can't shirk it. Where does the buck stop if not with the people in charge?
What should they do then?
Stick by the things that they actually promised. That, if they've committed to saying, look, we're going to tackle the issues, do it. They've made a lot of promises that they've not come up on. Clearly things are ongoing. Yeah, we've had some circumstances come up in terms of COVID, but it didn't stop them tackling the issues that affect women, that affect pensioners, that affect carers, that affect parents. They've done absolutely nothing. Just like JFK Rees-Mogg said, join the army. That's your option. That's what you've got to do if you want to survive. That's what they're doing as a government now to us all. They've made promises that they won't back up because they don't care.
They don't do anything, ultimately. Thank you, Stuart. Paul, last word on this. I mean, we've been talking about this for decades, about the entrenched, somebody came up with a structural misogyny. Well, we've been talking about these things for thank you, Jacqueline Hemmings. We've been talking about this for decades, and still it lies there. It needs something more radical than is what's happening, doesn't it?
Well, if people think that you can keep things generally the same but improve the lives of women, or you can keep things generally the same or improve the lives of people from different backgrounds, then they're talking absolutely. We've got an ingrained system of privilege in this country. Are Rees-Mogg's kids going to end up on the bins? Are they? Are they going to end up as a cleaner in the local primary school? No, of course they're not. Of course they're not. That tells you as much about anything as the same reason that a working class woman is incredibly unlikely to become the CEO of some sort of hedge fund or something like that. You know what I mean? They're not... This is structural, and Rees-Mogg's sons will end up in positions where they have really high-paid jobs because of the class system of this country, and working class people won't. And within working class society, women end up doing a lot of the most important work, which actually corresponds to the lowest paid work or the not paid work and the hardest work. And that reduces their life expectancy. So until we address the class system that perpetuates every single aspect of our lives. If we just keep on talking about, oh, you know, what we need to do is improve things for women, this is terrible or whatever, then nothing's going to change. You know, you may get a few women promoted who can thrive within the system, perhaps someone who's wealthy, perhaps someone who, you know, someone is deemed worthy of promotion because it's going to look good on their books. But instead of that, you know, we need real structural change.
Thank you so much. Agreed. Sometimes when I've messed up the timing, we get a last question, and instead of asking all 4 people what they think about it, I ask the designated person to comment, and if there's time, the other 3 people get a chance for an odd word or 2. And the 4th question was the cooking oil crisis. Stuart, the cooking oil crisis, is this a storm in a teacup or a storm in a frying pan? I mean, is it something we need to be worried about?
I think as working people, we do. I mean, it sounds like absolute nonsense. The idea that, you know, Tesco's rationing sunflower oil sounds like it's something that we could just get over. But what it actually does is it predominantly affects the poorest workers, because sunflower oil globally is included in much of the cheaper food that we consume, and certainly, you know, the foods that are available to the lowest earners. If there's an increase in the cost of that, you know, baseline cost of living at the bottom end, it's going to dramatically affect people who are earning the lowest wages. And certainly, obviously, with it being attached to Ukraine as a nation before Russia invaded, produced 6% of all the world's calories. It produced 17% of all the wheat in the world. You know, these are staple things that the lowest earners kind of have to rely on, depend on. We keep hearing, you know, rich people tell us how great they'd be at being poor, and how long a loaf of bread would last them making sandwiches, you know. And they have no real concept that if that loaf of bread jumps from 50 pence to £1, that might be nothing for them, but that could be devastating to a family you know, who are already suffering huge cost of living increase when they go into the supermarket. So, I mean, it's compounding this issue and really like hammering home for the lowest earners just how you know, under supported we are, how low wages are, how little there are with regards to protections.
Thank you, Stuart. Perfect timing with 1 minute to go. I mean, the World Bank is saying that this is a human catastrophe. With a 37% jump in food prices, they're predicting. And it's not just the Ukraine war, but that's a major issue. But there's the energy crisis as well. Sam, stealing your time from your half of the show. I mean, have you any comments on what Stuart said that you want to make?
Well, actually, I just wanted to pick up one of the things in the comments, which was that Jan, again, who's on fire tonight, says, you know, they'll probably use palm oil to substitute. What we will see is capitalism will find a way. And that way won't be driven by people's health. It won't be driven by the environment and getting to net zero. It'll be driven purely on profit. And I think that's something that we just need to be really aware of whenever we make these decisions, and just to keep an eye out, because none of us want to be complicit in that, but many people don't have a choice. They've just got to buy the food that they can afford to feed the family, especially now.
Thank you. Short word, Jane, have you got? We're a minute over.
I'm just gutted. There are already people who can't afford to eat. This is just horrendous.
And the government that seems to have not a clue of a short-term fix, never mind a long-term strategy. Paul, last word of the show for you, and then we'll shut up shop.
The world is a very interconnected place. It would be nice if we would cooperate with one another for each other's benefit, rather than trying to make money for a few people and starting wars and things like that.
Thank you very much indeed. God bless you all. as always. I'm glad to see the sensible comment that's happening on about socialist Tinder, and sort of I see that the comment section has disintegrated into schoolboy banter, sort of a school child banter, because there are some ladies involved in it. Well done, everybody. Sort of in the meantime, your team here have been talking really wonderful, exciting things, as always, just so interesting to listen to, and what a different take on the world. What we're going to do now, as always, people, is we're going to listen to Joe Solo. I'm going to pour myself some more water for my glass, and then we're going to come back in the care of Samantha Townsend, who is going to take us into a less structured half of the show. Thank you for listening to us. If you've got to go, goodbye. See you next week. You're welcome to stay, and sort of we're not going to get drawn into sort of Tinder banter. We're going to have sensible, but if you're capable of talking sensibly, we'll talk to you as well. And the school teacher and me coming out there. Did you notice that? And so hopefully see you for the second half. God bless you. Thank you, team. And take it away, Joe Solo.
My name is Jack Atkinson, I'm not afraid, and I live and die by this vow that I've made. The only good fascist's a dead one, they say, and around the rear we are. When I first left all them months ago, I told him I'd come not to kill but to cure. Well, for an ambulance driver my shot's pretty sure, and around the rear we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. I told my mother, now mother, be strong, for the left way is right and the right way is wrong. And you can stick that on my grave when I'm gone, for I'm a real we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. The cast may be cast, and the cast may be cast, but you armies of darkness, you best do your worst. 'Cause to win, yeah, well, you gotta get past us first, and around here we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around. pasaran, no pasaran, no pasaran today. No pasaran, no pasaran, no pasaran today. No pasaran, no pasaran, no pasaran today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pasaran here today. Keep the red flag flying here.
Hello. And you know what? It's not up to John what we talk about. And I'm going right to Socialist Tinder because it is adorable and I love it. And for the benefit of our... we don't put this bit out as a podcast, do we, Paul?
No, we put everything out as a podcast now.
We put everything out. There we go. So for the benefit of our podcast listeners, it is incumbent on me to talk about it because now you've teased them, right? And it's not nice. So it was in response to what Stuart said about Jacob Rees-Mogg said if you're poor you can join the army. There you go, problem solved. And Jacqueline in the comments said I'm 4'11" with the speed of a tortoise. I don't think the army wants me. And Neil, who is king of jokes, says have you just quoted your Tinder profile? And then Jacqueline, bless her heart, said, oh yeah, I'm having to beat them off with a stick. Now, at this point, I'm broken. There are so many things I really wanted to say after that, but I don't know Jacqueline personally. I didn't want to offend her character, but Neil goes right in there with, we don't need to know about your sexual habits, which is slightly better. What I was going to go in with was something along the lines of, you better be charging extra for that. And then Mark said, no, Neil, this is not Socialist Tinder, which I think we should rename the programme Socialist Tinder.
Hey, this bit was nearly called the Red Room by accident because I didn't know what that was.
And then
Apparently
Neil
it's a
says,
thing.
it is Socialist Tinder. There's lots of love to go around here. So we circle around to a very wholesome place. There we go. Wholesome has definitely been my word of the day. I've used that word a lot today. My 8-year-old asked me what wholesome meant, and I really struggled to define it. I just said it's like, healthy. Anyway. Okay, well, thanks very much for that, Neil, and thank you, Jacqueline, for being such a sport with Neil and his terrible jokes. Socialist Tinder is not a thing, but we've just invented it, Jacqueline, and you've helped it come to life, so thank you. It definitely tickled me. I was in a community centre today with work, and there was a massive laminated sign on the wall on one of the notice boards in between the local, Zumba class and the walking group, a sign in the middle that said, no glitter in any shape or form to be used in this room, in capital letters, and that made me giggle as well. So maybe I'm just having a giggly day. But no, yes. Neil says wholesome means there's a few gaps in it, like Swiss cheese. Oh, Neil. Oh, great. Well, you've all been absolutely on fire with your comments today. We've had so many of them. I did copy a couple over, and I wanted to recognize Neil's comment actually, because he's so right, and I didn't want it to sound the way that I came across and what I said. You know, I didn't give a very nuanced point of view, and he gives a very good counterpoint, which is that you don't necessarily get what you pay for when it comes to staff. He says the chief executive of Bradford Council is one of the highest paid in the country, and they've trashed their children's services. Their children's services have now been taken back over by the government because they failed so badly. He says, allegedly, she appoints her mates into senior roles who then get consultants in to tell them how to do their job. So saying paying people more means you get more talent is untrue, and it's offensive to those on lower wages. You know, I totally agree with a lot of that. But it is the case that there are certain people like a lot of people who work for councils are accountants and lawyers. And they specialize in specific parts of law, specific parts of accountancy, and whether it's just or fair or not, those people with those kinds of jobs have a certain expected pay for those kinds of jobs, and that's how the labour market works. I'm not saying at all that people who earn £100,000 a year work harder than anybody who earns £10,000 a year. There's a proverb, isn't it? If hard work, if money was the result of hard work, every woman, one of them says every woman in Africa, I'm not sure about that, but every woman would be a millionaire. You know, there's a lot of work people do which is totally unpaid and unvalued, and what money you get paid for something doesn't correlate to its value in society. That's a really, really great point.
There's an extension to that as well. Like, did you do you think about accountability as well? Because a lot of the time people say, oh, people get these high salaries because they're so accountable, and you know, if things go wrong, it's their neck on the line and stuff like that. In my experience, they get promoted up when they fail. So like, I know head teachers who've done a terrible job, and now what academy chains are doing is, oh, let's get them out. Or like, John will probably remember this from his teaching career. Some people, they just want out of the classroom because they're terrible, so they promote them out. And now there's jobs for them all over in academy chains. It's like, oh yeah, you can have some sort of made up role. So there's actually, for me, in the higher paid roles, less accountability because they fall up. They're like, oh, they move on to something else. They get these massive payouts and then go into consultancy work. You know, so there's way less accountability. Like, if someone at my level of work loses their job, then that's it. You know, like, they don't fall up. They don't all of a sudden, well, your next job's going to be even more highly paid, and here's a massive golden goodbye, you know. Or like, we saw it with the CEO of Barclays Bank, who got I think it was Barclays Bank, correct me if I'm wrong, who got huge payout for failure. You know, they'd done absolutely terrible. We're getting massive bonuses all the time. Did really badly and got this massive payout. And then they're like, all right, great. And then there's just this revolving door of all these people. Oh, well, the only people who can be a CEO is someone who's done it. Yeah, they've done the job before. Absolutely appallingly badly. But they've done it before, so therefore we'll let them be CEO of our company. It's appalling. There is less accountability the higher your pays, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm not one to badmouth council staff, as in sort of the council staff that I work with, because obviously I don't want to upset anybody, don't want any employment tribunals coming my way. But, you know, the staff don't get voted out, the councillors get voted out, and the staff stay the same. So if the council as a body is not looking after the community, it's usually not down to an individual councillor who is usually trying the hardest to get the best bite of the cherry for their community that they can. but it's them that get voted out. They've got the accountability, the democratic oversight. Yeah. Anyway, that's a dark alleyway I don't want to go down, because I don't want to be accused of slagging off council staff. It's not a good way to go.
Jacqueline's made a cracking point as well
Stuart.
there about Cressida Dick. I don't know if you saw that comment come in.
You read it if you can see it.
It says, she just said, it's not the same kind of job, but look at Cressida Dick, where she got a huge payout for being pressured to resign from the Met Police and a seat in the House of Lords. It's like, it's a perfect example of someone who's done appallingly bad at the job, and then the establishment crowd around her and say, well done, Cressida. You did the operation that killed John Charles de Menezes, and we promoted you for that. And the next thing we're going to do after one of your officers murdered a woman, and then your officers then turned on the women who protested that, and you've done all these awful things, and that wasn't even the thing that you got wrong. And then you turned a blind eye to parties in Parliament and in Downing Street. But instead of the criticism coming your way, what we'll do is we'll give you a good payout. You've had a good run. Thanks, Cressida. And by the way, House of Lords, unelected.
Yeah.
Let's get you in there. Great. Unbelievable. The system is so corrupt.
What are your thoughts, Stuart?
On falling upwards.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, well, that's the kind of thing that like defines your class, isn't it? None of us here could fall upwards. None of us could, land that. When we lose a job, we are in a situation where life's catastrophic, and you're bashed about emotionally and strained. These people agree to resign. They have conversations where they'll negotiate a resignation. Working class people don't get that. They get dragged into a room, scared, humiliated, and then told to leave. And they leave the building, often with no real cause. People get fired for all kinds of reasons. And they have to go home, go, Christ, what am I going to do now? No one in, the upper class, the decision-making class, the landlord class, ever gets into that position, do they? Where they go, my kids are going to go without. I'm not going to have a home. My relationship's going to crumble. It's going to just be a catastrophe. That's where the line is for who you should be looking after. Where the catastrophe. Some people just have issues in life. It's like, oh, well, I can spend some money on that. It'll go away. My boiler's exploded. Right? Some people can have that fixed straight away because they have the money in the bank. And other people have to go without heating. Extrapolate that to the extremes. And you get where the division is. If, somebody lost the 50 grand a year job, some of these people are like, well, it was just something I did. I have my interests elsewhere. But if you lose your job as a normal person, that is a catastrophe, and it could shatter your life chances forevermore. You might never recover from that. That's, the real thing for me.
I remember in the 90s there was this like weird television program I watched, and I can't remember what it was. It was obscure. But there was this guy on and his wife, and he was like, he was some sort of lord, and he was saying, well, I simply don't know how I'm going to afford the upkeep of my castle anymore. And he had this big castle, and he was he couldn't afford it anymore because he wasn't doing any work, and the castle wasn't doing anything, and he'd become used to just having the castle being enough to continue owning the castle. The castle itself, even though it didn't have visitors, it didn't earn any money, his wealth was enough to continue the ownership of the castle. But at some point, that kind of started to change, and we're moving back towards that. You wouldn't hear that now. You wouldn't hear someone who is sitting on a load of wealth suddenly worrying and thinking, I'm going to have to become an ordinary person here. Like, you know, and as I said earlier on, Rees-Mogg's kids or whoever, the upper class kids, they are just not in the same stratosphere as us. Like, any of our kids could end up working. Like, I've worked as a cleaner. You know, our kids might work as cleaners. You know, they might work in McDonald's or something like that. And I'm not criticizing any of these jobs. You know, I think incredibly hard working people a lot of the time. It's just not going to happen for those people. They're not going to do a manual job unless they want to be like some sort of celebrity personal trainer or something like that. They are not going to have to do those things. They are not going to have to make this. They might decide to slum it and work in some sort of thing, like some sort of high class shop or something like that. They might, and that'll be them making a choice to do that. They'll never have to, because the system has gone in, because the system was changing. It had changed, and then they come around and they'll make sure that those people will not have to suffer the indignity of ever having to feel like they're anything like us.
Were you wanting to go in there, Stuart, or were you just stretching?
Yeah. I mean, we get pretendy, especially pretendy Tories who pretend that it's like, oh well, the cost of living crisis is coming, and it's like I won't be able to afford me shopping at Waitrose anymore. And like there was a guy last month, went the Tory MP, and there was like a bit of a backlash against him. He was like, you're only 80 something grand a year, give your head a shake. But like we have this kind of political class almost of people pretending to be workers, right? Like Paul Howell is a cracking one because he's a member of that blue collar Tory group, isn't he? Right? And